Even though we are less than a month away from the release of Marvel's Wolverine, for some reason, I cannot help but wonder what is next for Insomniac after the release of Wolverine. Which I'm well aware, I'm being an absolute greedy pig of a fan asking myself what is next before the release of their upcoming game, but the reason I am almost always thinking of what Marvel game Insomniac could take on next is because Insomniac is seemingly the only goddamn studio on the planet with the motion to actually announce a Marvel game and then follow through and get it done. As somebody who has been desperately hoping for other Marvel characters not named Spider-Man to get a share of the spotlight, it seems like Insomniac is my only hope. And because of that, today I want to talk about a few Marvel games that I think could be next for Insomniac after the release of Wolverine, not including Spider-Man 3 of course, because we all know that is happening eventually, probably in 2028 or 2029 if I had to guess. Now as of right now, sadly I have not played Marvel's Wolverine and therefore do not know how the game is going to end. However, even without knowing the ending of the game, I'm willing to guess that the ending will leave the door open for future mutant stories in Insomniac's Marvel Universe, and if I had to put money down on any game that could be next, it would definitely be an X-Men game, which would be an absolutely phenomenal choice and a dream come true for so many people. The X-Men have of course featured prominently in things like the LEGO Marvel games, Ultimate Alliance, as well as most notably the X-Men Legends games, all of which are good to even great, but many of them are old, some of which are over 20 years old, so I'm going to assume that some of you listening to this video have never even heard of those games or played them. We are long overdue for a big budget AAA X-Men game in the same vein as something like the Insomniac games or Arkham games, and what better time to make one than now, especially if Wolverine is a massive success for Insomniac. One of the issues of making this video now, before I've gotten my hands on Marvel's Wolverine, is the fact that I could be talking about something that is potentially set up in Marvel's Wolverine through the story or more likely an end credit scene, but I really don't care because this is probably the game I want to see the most, and I honestly think strategically it makes a lot of sense as well. Not only could this be a quote-unquote sequel to Marvel's Wolverine, which if the game is good should set up an X-Men game for success, but if we zoom out and think more about Marvel as a whole, and specifically Marvel's humongous cinematic universe, guess who is about to become the focal point of the MCU post-Secret Wars? The X-Men. Why not fully lean into that more across comics, movies, shows, and gaming? The X-Men of course are always a focal point of the comics as they provide so much content for the brand and typically sell pretty well, especially compared to a lot of Marvel's roster of characters, so I think that box is checked. Even though X-Men does not have a major live action show, X-Men 97 has been a big success for Marvel. Well actually I kind of take that back because season 1 was a massive success and season 2 left some things to be desired, but they are still making additional seasons, which showcases a commitment for them on television. The next X-Men movie is set to release in less than 2 years with an absolutely loaded cast, great up and coming director, and Feige is hoping to build the foundation of the MCU post Secret Wars off of their backs. The only thing seemingly missing is gaming, which yes, I get there is a Wolverine game right around the corner, but I kind of just remove him from this discussion as Marvel has always prioritized Wolverine almost more than any other hero not named Spider-Man. I have no fear about Wolverine getting his. It's time to let characters like Cyclops, Storm, Rogue, Nightcrawler, Iceman, Beast, as well as so many other great characters get a chance to shine. If you're able to make an X-Men game that can rival the likes of the Arkham games or Insomniac Spider-Man, it will only make it more likely that their new movies in the MCU succeed. Now of course, an X-Men game would almost certainly not be happening until sometime in the 2030s after the release of Marvel Spider-Man, but say we aim for 5 years post Wolverine, which I think is a reasonable timeline compared to what Insomniac has done with Spider-Man, that could put an X-Men game on a similar timeline to the release of say an X-Men sequel in the MCU, which could make the success of an X-Men game even more likely if it capitalizes off the success of an MCU movie. And I'm not saying I want one of those throwback video games where it was based off of a movie or anything, and I'm really hoping they wouldn't use the same exact team, but I just think it's smart brand synergy, especially if the MCU movie ends up being really good, which I'm not going to make this whole video about that movie, but I'm pretty confident it's at least going to be very solid. I like the cast a lot, I like the creative team, I have really high hopes, and I think following up a potentially really good X-Men movie with a game is a really smart business decision. However, that's enough of me trying to sell the game. Hopefully somebody from Insomniac was listening, but let's get into some of the things that I would like to see from a potential X-Men game. Of course, I would love to see a huge amount of characters, but I'm not sure how feasible that is, but a brief list of my non-negotiable characters would be Storm, Cyclops, Jean, Iceman, Nightcrawler, and Rogue, as well as Charles of course. Not only are all of those characters just so iconic and narratively interesting, but their powers are also vastly different, which would create a set of truly unique gameplay experiences that would make each character and combat encounter feel fresh and fun if executed correctly. Just imagine blasting through enemies head on as Scott, or focusing more on stealth as you stick to the shadows as Nightcrawler, or just being a badass and basically doing whatever the hell you want as Storm. I will say power scaling in an X-Men game would probably be extremely difficult, but I trust Insomniac would be able to figure something out. Similar to Wolverine, I definitely think something like an X-Men game would work better in a non-open world game. I would love for Xavier's school to perhaps serve as a hub for things like upgrades, mission selection, and cosmetics, but each mission would be better if it were in a remote location, all over the world, or potentially in space. When it comes to villains, I do think there are many amazing choices for a potential game because the X-Men Rogues Gallery is absolutely loaded, so I guess I don't really think there is one that I absolutely need to see, but if I had to choose, I do think the Brotherhood of Mutants or Apocalypse would make the most sense considering Sinister and it seems like Trask will already be a massive part of the Wolverine game. Again, it is very likely in a month's time I will be making a more in-depth video on this very topic if we get some sort of end credit that seemingly confirms that an X-Men game is on the horizon, but I absolutely needed to talk about it in this video because it seems like the most logical and it's probably at the top of my list when it comes to Marvel games I want to see most, but there are lots of other great alternatives that also would be awesome to see from Insomniac. For example, with Hulk, it seems like there is clearly no rush to give Mark Ruffalo a stab at his own solo movie within the MCU, so at the very least, Marvel, for the love of God, could you just give us a kick-ass Hulk video game? Similar to the X-Men, in the past, Hulk has featured prominently in some Marvel Ensemble games, as well as his own games, like the Incredible Hulk tie-in game for the only MCU Hulk film that we've ever got, which was a fairly solid game in my opinion. I remember playing it as a kid and thinking it was pretty cool. I definitely liked the Iron Man and Captain America tie-in games a bit more, but I honestly think those MCU tie-in games were all just kind of solid. Nothing special obviously, but before playing Batman Arkham Asylum, I didn't really expect much better. However, earlier in the 2000s, we got what I think is pretty clearly the best Hulk game of all time, that being the Incredible Hulk Ultimate Destruction, so that might be why I think a little less of the MCU Incredible Hulk game. The Incredible Hulk Ultimate Destruction is just the definition of fun. Now, it may not hold up as the best game today, as the technology has advanced so much since 2005, but for the time the gameplay and destruction felt groundbreaking, and as a kid, it truly felt like I was the Hulk, and I think Insomniac is the perfect studio to take inspiration from something like Ultimate Destruction, bring it into the 2020s, or I guess I should say 2030s, as that's probably when it would come out if that's the next game Insomniac does decide to make, and give Hulk the proper modern video game he deserves. Just imagine what we got from Hulk in Marvel's Avengers, who I honestly thought was a highlight of that game, and make the combat, story, environment, visuals, movement, and basically just everything better. I mean, that sounds pretty awesome to me. I know the Hulk's popularity has possibly dipped a little bit in the 21st century due to, I just think, other characters passing him up a little bit in Marvel as they become more of a focal point of things like the MCU, but I do think Hulk is definitely popular enough to support his own game and give it a truly viable chance at being a financial success, which at the end of the day is the most important thing to always keep in mind, because as these games continually get more and more expensive, it will only restrict access for other characters to get their own game, but I do think Hulk is one of the few characters who is popular enough to warrant his own solo game. Now, when it comes to what I personally would love to see from a Hulk game, I do think logistically something off-world inspired by Planet Hulk does make the most sense. Not only do I think having Hulk battle and be forced to survive out in space on a different planet is a very cool setting, but I do think having something in space allows for more powerful enemies who could offer more unique challenges, a bit more room to destroy as you are not at risk of leveling skyscrapers in New York City and possibly killing thousands, and also just an excuse to not really feature Bruce Banner. To be clear, I think Bruce is a phenomenal character who could offer a lot story-wise, so perhaps he could feature prominently in something like flashbacks, which detail the Hulk's origin or how he got to Sakaar, but if I'm just being real with you, in a Hulk game, I have no interest in playing as Bruce Banner. I want the Hulk to be fighting cool monsters and destroying shit. Also, I do think taking inspiration from something like Planet Hulk is the easiest way to overcome some of the power scaling issues that would present themselves when creating a game for a character as powerful as the Hulk. Also, if you have ever read Planet Hulk, just imagine some of the boss fights that we could get. I mean, my god, we are talking about some truly crazy combat experiences. I definitely think crafting something like a Hulk game could be challenging, but if it is done right, it could be an absolute blast that could fill the void in my heart that I have considering the MCU seemingly hates Bruce Banner. I get the legal issues in regards to the rights of Hulk, but seriously, Disney and Universal, I need you to figure this shit out. Wait a second, does that legal issue also affect the gaming rights of Hulk? I honestly have no idea. In the comments down below, if it does affect the potential of a Hulk video game, please lie to me in the comments and tell me it doesn't, because if this dream is also dead, I'm gonna be really fucking pissed off. You know how earlier I talked about how a potential X-Men game could build off some of the hype of the upcoming X-Men MCU movie? Well, perhaps another group of heroes that I do think are popular enough to support their own game is confirmed already to be in the Insomniac Spider-Man universe, have unique abilities that would allow for gameplay to feel unique, and could potentially get a boost in marketing from a potential potentially massive successful MCU movie, that of course being Avengers Doomsday in Secret Wars, is the Fantastic Four. Now for those of you newer to the channel, a few years back I made a similar video to this trying to predict what was next for Insomniac, and back in like 2020 I was like 90% sure that the Fantastic Four would be next. Now obviously I was very wrong, so I'm not trying to give myself props or anything, but the reason I bring it up is because I still think it makes a lot of sense for Insomniac. When it comes to gameplay, I honestly think that Insomniac could do a lot of fun things with each character, and that argument in my mind has only been further solidified by what Insomniac has done with characters like Miles Morales, as well as what we are going to be getting soon from Jean Grey. Which I know Jean Grey isn't going to be a playable character, and I know Sue is vastly different from both characters, but a lot of the same gameplay assets they use for both could be imported and used to inspire what they could do with a character like Sue's invisibility and telekinesis, which yes, I get Sue is not technically a telekinetic, but it functions similarly. I think some of the stuff they did with Venom and Marvel Spider-Man 2 could provide a pretty great template for Ben, as that more brutish style of combat would be perfect for him, minus the spider-like abilities of course. And with characters like Reed and Johnny, I just think they'd be able to fill in the gaps pretty well, and I would just be very interested to see what Insomniac could do. I think they'd be able to design some really fun combat. Also, even though I did not mention this with the X-Men, but it also applies to them, I do think it'd be fun for Insomniac to build a game that was capable of having a co-op story, and both the X-Men and Fantastic Four would be perfect for that. Plus, selfishly as a fan of the Fantastic Four, not only do I think their family dynamic is immensely fun and could be great for stories, I do think some of the crazy adventures they go on could be great for a video game. Whether that is out in space to combat somebody like Galactus, the Negative Zone to go fight Annihilus, or of course Latveria to be talked down to by Doctor Doom. Not only would those new environments provide new gameplay challenges and enemy types, but also on top of that, I just think the game itself could be visually quite amazing. Oh, and of course, a Fantastic Four game would need to feature an expansive Baxter building that could operate as your hub of operations. The Fantastic Four as a team I just think are a lot of fun, and when you zoom out and look at everything they have to offer, I think that they offer a lot of potential to somebody like Insomniac, who I do think could turn a game focused on them into something truly special, and depending on what happens with Doomsday and Secret Wars, maybe even redeem them. I'm kidding of course, please do not get angry in the comments. I am just as excited as the next guy for Doomsday, and I love the design of the character. I love the aura farming that Doom is up to in the trailer, but some of the lines specifically from Sue have me a bit worried we may be losing the plot a little. But I am truly hoping that the movie makes like $2 billion and ends up being one of the best MCU movies of all time, but I can't lie to you, I'm just a little nervous though. Similar to the Fantastic Four, it did always seem like a Daredevil game would make a lot of sense for Insomniac, as even though he does not possess the strength and webs that Spider-Man does, he shares a similar acrobatic based combat and heightened senses that I do think the free flow combat Insomniac uses could fit pretty seamlessly. Plus you could pretty much use the same open world you already use for Spider-Man, but pared down slightly with a bit more detail, especially in Hell's Kitchen. I will say for probably close to a decade now, it has felt like a Daredevil game has always been right around the corner, as it seems like there is always a new rumor or supposed leak surrounding something like the Game Awards, saying that this is finally the event where we're going to be getting a Daredevil game finally announced, but sadly none of those rumors or leaks have come to fruition, most likely because they're 100% fake and people just make them up because they know they'll get a lot of clicks and views thanks to gullible Daredevil fans like myself, because I have yet to learn my lesson, and I'm always excited by the potential idea of finally getting a kick-ass Daredevil game. Also with the mods that people use for Marvel Spider-Man where they look like Daredevil and basically just reskin the character to be Daredevil, I mean come on, it looks pretty awesome. I also think Daredevil is a big enough character for his own solo game. He may be on the lower end of that scale, but I do think the budget for something like Daredevil would be far less than something like Spider-Man, Hulk, or X-Men due to the lesser powers and lower scale missions, as well as villains. Plus, he's already grown immensely in popularity thanks to the Daredevil series, so I honestly think Daredevil is not only a game that Insomniac already has a lot of the tools to make, but on top of that, I also think due to a potentially lower budget, it would be fairly low risk with pretty high upside, and for those reasons, I would love if Insomniac pivoted to Daredevil next. These next two I'm going to pair together because they certainly would be rated M in my opinion, and they both may not technically be popular enough to warrant their own game, but I do think they could be pretty cool, and that is Ghost Rider as well as Punisher. Now the one that I definitely think is less interesting and probably less inspiring for a lot of people, considering the shooter market is certainly oversaturated in gaming, and with a character like Frank, who I do think is a lot of fun and badass, but he certainly does not possess unique powers, so I do think the game could potentially be way too similar to the wide breadth of third-person shooters we already have, but I think the Punisher is dope. In a game where you travel the world taking out criminals with a really grounded and brutal combat system, sounds like a lot of fun to me. As well as with the Punisher label on it, I do think it would have a really good chance at being a financial success, as I do think even though he is probably the least known character character that we have talked about so far in this video, he is still well known enough to justify a game like this. Ghost Rider, on the other hand, I have no idea whether or not he's popular enough. My gut tells me no as of right now, but maybe that changes in a couple years when the MCU Ghost Rider film comes out. But when it comes to the idea of a Ghost Rider game that I would like to see, my thought is something in the same vein as the Doom games, but with Ghost Rider, plus a little bit more depth story-wise. Now, when I reference Doom, I'm talking more about the fast-paced, high-octane combat and violence that makes your heart start beating through your chest. I think that's perfect for a character like Ghost Rider, which unlike Doom, would be in third person, so perhaps the immersion would suffer a little bit, but I just love the combat of those games and the fast-paced nature of it. This does feel like something that would be better suited for a different developer, as I'm not sure it'd be Insomniac style, but I'd be really excited to see what they could do with a character like Ghost Rider and how maybe they would change their formula a little bit. Plus, of course, they are once again the only ones who can seemingly get any of these Marvel games off the ground, so I kind of have to put my faith in them. However, now, I want to know, what Marvel game not named Spider-Man would you like to see Insomniac do next? Thank you all so much for watching, and I will see you all in another video.